So our next performer is an open mic. She's from a crew called Say Word. They just came back from Brave New Voices. It's a slam competition all the way in Philadelphia. She's a wonderful poet, very talented. I'm glad to have her today. Danielle Shorr. Woo.
Hey guys, I'm really short. Okay, my name is Danielle Shorr. I currently live in LA, but I go to school in Orange. I go to Chapman. I'm studying creative writing, and in my free time, I do spoken word poetry, which, as you know, is awesome. But like he said, I recently competed in a national poetry competition with my team representing Los Angeles, and it was awesome, and I learned a lot about it, and it was just great. So basically, the movement theme this week is something that I really connect with. At first, I was like, I don't really work out or do anything. But thinking about it more, I was like, yeah, I actually relate to this. I have what is called a movement disorder, and it is a tremor of the hand that comes out when I use my hands. And so I spent a lot of time trying to write about it because I didn't really know how, and I think I figured it out. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Hands. My hands are never steady. My hands are always awake. My hands are cell phones on vibrate mode, acrobats walking a tightrope. My hands are never steady. I was 9 years old when I first became aware of the tremor in my hands. I was 9 years old when I first learned that there are parts of me that are broken. There are parts of me that are broken. I am a puzzle in the way that I am constantly trying to put myself back together, mixing sharp edges with crooked corners. I am never a clear picture, instead a blurry image. When I heard the diagnosis, a combination of complicated words called essential tremor, 9-year-old me didn't understand. All I knew was that I could not control my shaking. I was confused. Given the diagnosis of a disease that could not hurt me but couldn't be fixed, I later noticed my legs shook too. Sometimes even my words, when I spoke, I would stutter. I was often left wondering how it could be heard without a steady voice, how a girl like me could ever be heard without a steady voice, and a tremor that sometimes encompassed all of my body. As a kid, I was told I held the pencil incorrectly. How was I supposed to explain that wedging it between my palms was the only way that I could hold on, that there was no sandpaper between my fingers to keep things from slipping through them? It seemed like everything in my life has always slipped through them. I was told that my handwriting was messy. Messy was my inability to do anything with accuracy. I could feel my insecurity increasing, disorder following me around like a shadow. At times when I had come so close to forgetting, it would come back around and slap me in the face. Like the time I'd be accused of drug abuse, my shaky hands and body are sometimes confused with those of a user. I am never given a chance to explain. Constantly looked at like less of a person for not being physically in place, made to see that this part of me, my disability, a word that I have hid from so long. My disability is not all of me. It might be the first thing seen when we shake hands, but it's just a small fraction of me. My hands, they may not work perfectly, but they are beautiful in all of their shaking glory. My hands are unsteady. But then again, so is life. Thank you. So the next poem I'm going to do is, it's about first kisses. And basically that whole thing. In the back room of Dia's basement is where I had my first kiss, a Halloween party game of spin the bottle or 7 minutes in heaven or something like that, that consisted of 8 or so 13-year-olds sitting in a circle and spinning a cell phone. Yes, this was how we interacted with the opposite sex, as if we needed excuses to be able to kiss one another, and somehow or the other it always seemed to work. We would spend our Saturdays huddled in someone's basement, anxiously turning a piece of plastic or a different object because nobody ever seemed to have a bottle on them. But the night of my first kiss wasn't as awkward as a middle school encounter may seem. I remember a bottle being spun, my heart beating out of my chest due to nervousness. I remember how it landed on my 8th grade crush. Butterflies celebrated in my stomach as we shared a kiss in that back room that lasted about 2 seconds, but alas, it was a kiss, and to an awkward and quiet 13-year-old girl, it was like winning the lottery. I had never felt such ecstasy. I remember going home and jumping on my bed, replays of that moment running through my head. That night was the first time in my life that I had ever felt wanted. I remember every kiss that's made me feel home. I remember every person that's made my heart feel bubbly. I will always remember those that turned my stomach into a sanctuary, hosting butterflies after butterflies and then setting them free. There is no greater feeling free. I remember the first girl I kissed. I remember the softness of her lips. I remember feeling something that I had never felt before. And then I remember feeling ashamed and confused because from what I knew, girls weren't supposed to make me feel the way she did. But she did. She made me wonder everything I knew before them, made me question if I could ever feel that way again with someone of the opposite gender. The problem with that is that I was so concerned with gender that I forgot that we were human. And we all have the ability to kiss, so who cares if we're both women? Because when our lips touched for the first time, it felt right. It felt free. And maybe we'll never feel as good as we did in 8th grade. Maybe it's a bad thing that we can no longer rely on a game to make us feel that way. Maybe we're too concerned with titles and labels that we're missing the point we should love. Like 2 lanky teenagers that have just figured out that braces don't get stuck together when you kiss. We should listen to the old versions of ourselves and who we were back then. We should remember that if 2 lips touch and butterflies fly free, then that's what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to feel free, so be free. Thanks. So I'm going to do 2 more poems. I think I'm going to go with depressing last. I'll leave you on that note. This is called The Bucket List. I remember the day he told me. Driving down Deerfield Road, he said so casually, "I have cancer." The word we've been conditioned to fear, the one that we associate with our world falling apart, the one that we never want to hear coming from the mouths of our loved ones, but there it was. Spoken with such ease, the word released from my father's mouth. See, I've never been good at words or feelings or any of these human things that we're just supposed to know how to express naturally. So as he told me, I sat there in silence, the only sound being the soft hum of the highway around us, and we drove home. And that was that. We didn't talk about it much, just went through the motions like that was enough, and it was. The surgery was quick, and before we knew it, he was cancer-free, and I think we just assumed that we'd go on with our lives that easily, and for a while we did. But like every good story, there's a central conflict, one that we avoid or even face, but after some time it reappears as if to say, "You thought I'd just go away, didn't you?" And so it came back with a vengeance, one that would not be so easily cured like before, one that would change my life and force me to confront the feelings from which I'd always tried to hide. And this time, when he told me, there was no silence, no casual tone in his words. I could hear the tremble in his voice as he knocked on my door. He never knocks. And this was the beginning of a whole nother battle. The chemo took his silver locks, but not his soul. It tore and it ate at his body until the man that stood before me seemed almost unrecognizable. But he had made me a promise, one that he had no intention of breaking, so I stood by him during infusion after transfusion with a heavy heart and the fear that I might lose him, but never once did I let it show. I held myself strong because he did. I never let myself get discouraged because if he could be tough, then I could do. Sitting on my bed one day, weak and at his lowest, he told me to start planning. He said our lives were only just beginning and that this was merely a wake-up call to start living and that he wouldn't dare give up because for all of my years, he has been my rock and he would give anything to see me grow up, that he wasn't going to take no for an answer, that I was going to write our bucket list and he was going to beat this cancer, and he did. One Sunday in September, we went for a drive. Something I used to take for granted, but now couldn't be more grateful for. And with the sun blaring down on us and the clouds filling in the gaps of blue, I realized that it's moments like these that are the ones to cherish. It's moments like these that define the daily routine of our being. So hug your parents a little bit tighter, squeeze the ones you love a little bit longer, and make use of the time you have together, because you never know when one car ride might change everything. Thank you. I'm gonna do one more poem, and it's newer and it's kind of sad. It's called "When You Love Someone Who Is Not There," and it's basically about loving someone who is physically not there, not like ghosts or anything, just like someone, right? When you love someone who is not there, your mind will learn to create. Draw images of how things should be, erase the ones that depict how it actually is. Eventually, you will forget what is real and what is make-believe. You will convince yourself that you are not forgotten, and that even though you haven't heard from him in days, you will tell yourself that you are still wanted. Regardless of the fact that you barely want anything to do with yourself, you will somehow believe that someone else does. He will not tell you, though. You will have to remind yourself that he is too busy, far too involved, even for a hello. You will have to remember that his life never intended on having you be part of it, and that you will probably never be a part of it. You will be reminded of every time you are promised future, and your wanting for it will become unbearable. You will lay awake at night like you always do, this time tasting of more than just alcohol and regret. You will swallow your own tongue, wondering why fate never seems to be on your side, thinking maybe you were never meant to love in the first place. That meeting him was a mistake. You should have known better anyway to fall for a guy with a heart already occupied. You know all too well that there is not enough room in one for two when you are the tenant with the most vacant body. Stop trying to fill yourself with things that don't exist. You will need to recall every time you have built yourself up, your expectations piling above you, never anticipating the crash. You always seem to be staring blank-eyed when everything around you crumbles into disaster. You learn to pick up the pieces and glue them into something decent enough to look at. Your mind is still painting pictures on a canvas that will most likely never be tangible, and you will be reminded of it when you're laying in bed and your hands grab for someone who is not there. When you love someone who is not there, you will spend every second of the day searching for them in crowded rooms, when in reality you know they were never there to begin with, and they probably never will be. Thank you.